Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On this Monday evening, those of you who are not watching Game of Thrones and who are with us, tonight's topic is going to be jobs, job interviews, recruitment, and so on and so forth. Okay, it's trial exam night, which is always quite nice. As always, we have two different exams, two different exam questions, different exam situations. They all revolve around the topic of work, obviously, as this is the headline. The first exam is probably a little more straightforward. It covers the recruitment process and job interviews as such. The important steps in a job interview, what to take care of or what to be careful about if you write the CV and the motivational letter. Well, as most of you have done this already in their lives at some stage, you will definitely know what we are talking about. You'll be familiar with the concept. The situation is as follows. You're doing an internship in an international company. That is why, like, the international is the setting that puts you into the situation of having to speak English. There is a couple of companies also in our surroundings that basically have English as their working language. You're doing an internship, what's it called, a practicum there, and it is the Tag der offenen Tür, and the company is searching for some new apprentices, some new Lehrlinge, and you have to hold a talk in front of an audience. The audience are the people who might be potentially interested in working in this company. You tell them what a typical recruitment process looks like. You tell them what the most important points in a good motivational letter are and the do's and don'ts of a motivational letter and the CV. There are some things that you should not do in your CV, not do anymore in your CV. There's a couple of things that basically went out of fashion, kind of. Then we focus on job interviews. What to do in a job interview, what not to do in a job interview. And then we have the open job and job interviews questions. In the job interview, it will all be about how to prepare for a job interview, what to do, what not to do, what leaves a good impression, maybe also some preparation work that you should do beforehand. Yeah, I think that's it. So, as I said, the situation is you're holding a talk at the Tag der offenen Tür, trying to find new apprentices. Are you ready?
Yes. So switch the cams.
Yes.
So are we actually? Yeah, I know. No, it's a bit. Yeah.
Some camera problems down here.
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not lowest possible adjustment. Okay.
The greatness of chairs that can move up and down. Okay. As always, in the first round, we're going to do the introduction. I can never say that word, and I always use it. We do the introduction session. So Chris is going to make up a fake identity, and we're going to skip that in the second one because 2 fake identities per evening are a little bit too much. So, welcome to your English exam.
Hello.
Would you mind telling us who you are and why you're here, please?
No, I wouldn't. So my name is John. And I'm actually a biologist, but I got tired of it actually. It's just a boring job. I did some lab work, I did also some field work. I worked with a lot of turtles.
Nice.
And now I'm doing the A-levels. Try to pass them, of course, in order to become a teacher.
Sweet.
Yes, in mathematics and physics.
Well, that's the part about it that is not that sweet, really. So biology was too boring for you, you said?
Yeah.
It always sounds like such an interesting field, really.
Yeah, it's still interesting, of course, but it's just I need change. Basically. Yeah.
Well, so you have a basically a CV that has had a few different stations already, which plays into your hands, I hope, for the topic. So your topic is recruitment and job interviews. I guess you've done a good many of them. So would you mind telling us what the recruitment process looks like and so on and so forth?
Dear ladies and gentlemen, today I'm gonna talk about the recruitment process, and I'm gonna talk about 3 points basically. And first off, I'm gonna start with the different steps and the typical recruitment process on the point of companies, on the viewpoint of the companies. And then I'm gonna talk about the most important points that have to be included in a good motivational letter, and the do's and the don'ts of writing a CV. So basically, when you decide to apply for a job, of course, the company at first has to receive different things from you before you can even have a job interview or get a job interview, basically, which includes the CV and often the motivational letter. And if they have gone through them, both of the documents, let's call them, you're invited to a job interview, and then normally there are a few people there. So there is competition, as always, as everywhere. And if the job interview went well and they picked you, you're the fortunate one, you've been picked. Normally there are even a few more steps than just saying, yeah, okay, that's the guy. Normally nowadays there is something called assessment centers that test you in all different aspects, that test how good you are in different fields, and if you're really the best workforce they can get for this vacant job. And some sort of assessment is done here, and sometimes there are also even more steps where the big boss, let's call him or her, wants to talk with you in person and decides upon if you if you match into the team, and so on and so on. The most important things to have included in your motivational letter, I think the most important thing is to find a good reason why you are the best possible person to have or to get this job, and what motivates you during work, or to do even what motivates you if you're not motivated. So how can you motivate yourself? And yeah, it should be not a super exaggerated thing or text, but it shouldn't hold back any positives you have, of course. Sometimes you can also use a bit of candy on the top. That's it. You can do that, but don't exaggerate it. And the do's and don'ts of motivational letter. The do's and don'ts of a No, I'm at the CV. And now with this CV, of course, is that basically you should include your education. In my case, biology, and I of course did primary and secondary school. Of course, if you want to do biology, you have to do it. But also your interests, which means you don't have to list every hobby that's not interested. So your interest and your kind of special fields you're really good at. So you might be a biologist, but you can also use Photoshop, or you have special skills in video editing or whatever that suits this job included. And yeah, then I think you're good to go, actually. Of course, there are more things to do, but I think time is up.
Would you, in a CV, because you mentioned the hobbies type of thing, many people list sports because they're into sports. Do you think that's a good thing to do, or should I just, is my future employer interested in whether or not I have been playing football for, or do you see any advantages of including such information?
I think it depends if it's like football or soccer or something like this. If it's a team sport, I think it's interesting for the future employer. If it's just a hobby, when I just write in there, I like doing trail running for myself. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but
doesn't help the job.
Yeah.
So the same as for all the other points. If it suits the job, you.
Yeah.
Like I guess the team spirit kind of thing is quite good. Like.
Yeah, I think it can be used with every job. Not especially with the specific job, but for every job, team things are really great, and social skills and all the stuff, of course.
True. Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
Once you have successfully handed in a motivational letter and a CV, you're hopefully gonna get invited to a job interview.
Yes.
Which is especially, I guess, at a younger age, something that is quite tricky. Like, job interviews for apprentices when they're like 15, 16 is, I guess, quite hard. Do you have any ideas on how you could prepare and how you could prepare for a job interview in such a way that you're maybe not that nervous anymore? Like, any ideas?
I think the best things you can do, what really helped me, is to talk with your parents, for example, or other experienced people you have good connection to, and ask them how job interviews work, what they did when they first applied at their first job. Sometimes parents also have are the decision takers. So they know they have led job interviews. So they really know what's going on there. And I think you can also practice it, especially if you're a bit introverted and nervous, generally with speaking in front of people. You can practice it basically, and of course you can kind of practice your appearance, and that you just have a good make a good impression actually on those hopefully future employers.
Would you also practice specific questions? Like, there's lots of information on the internet saying, I don't know, the 20 most commonly asked or most frequently asked interview questions. Would you go as far as properly practicing them with your family, or?
Well, I'd look them up, and I think I'd pick out the really tricky ones, especially if there are one of the most trickiest questions, I think, to answer appropriately is, why am I the best person for this job? So of course the most common question will be, because I have done this and I have done this and I have those skills, as every other person would say, of course, because it suits the job. But I think that's something that's really important to practice. So just maybe think about something that kind of made an impact on your life or something. It's different for every person, so yeah. But yeah, you would punchline of the whole thing. You would practice some sort of them too. Like, yeah. In your job as a biologist, you probably did have some job interviews. Like, I guess you did some jobs before. Was there a question that you found really hard that they asked you, or something that you didn't really particularly know how to answer? Or well, I did some sort. I did know how to answer. Especially the question with my negatives, since sometimes I'm not that confident, and I tend to be an honest person and just tell what my negatives are and not my positives. Okay. So, and I think you have to be careful if you're showing, present yourself like, I'm not good at this and I'm not good at that. Do you have any positive things or skills, or I don't know? Yeah, I don't know. So it's, I think, in both ways. If you exaggerate the negatives, if you exaggerate the positives, it's bad. So there should be leveled out, actually. Yeah. Good idea, actually. And thinking about both questions, I find both of them equally hard to answer. Like, what are you good at and what are you bad at? It's like, I always found those very hard. Well, anyway, that was it for tonight, or for this topic. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Okay, let's have a quick look at the task and the achievement. We talked about everything that was important. So in the task achievement section, all 3 questions would be answered. Different steps in a typical recruitment process. He mentioned the assessment center, sorry. Something that is quite famous. What's wrong? Famous, that was the word I was looking for. Wasn't that hard, really. Nowadays, you go through like a set of tests, basically tests that test various different skills. Not only factual skills, but they would also test stuff like emotional intelligence and so on and so forth. So he mentioned all of that. Motivational letters, the good old cover letter from the past, what should be in there, what shouldn't not be in there. In the CV, yeah, well, we mentioned the most important aspects as well. Whether or not you should give the whole list of your education is debatable, because everyone went to Volksschule normally. Same goes for the hobbies and stuff. Putting in an endless list of hobbies probably doesn't make an awful lot of sense. That was a really good point, actually. He mentioned that and discussed that, whether or not it makes sense to like add football and all the other sports that we are doing. Yeah, that was it. I think the job interviews were done or were talked about as well. Yeah, I think that was it. Is there anything I should comment on? So far not, but we have a comment which is nice. That's very good. The comment is nice, and the actual words written are saying nice. Ah, well then, satisfied with that. Makes me jump right into topic number 2. Maybe a little less factual, maybe the topic that draws a little more on, well, like the broader picture, world knowledge type of thing. Obstacles in the working world, that's also what it's called in your books, for as far as I know.
Obstacles are Hindernisse, Hürden, like stuff that you cannot, or problems that you may encounter. The situation here is a bit more traditional, or at least traditional for my exams. You're preparing for the A-levels in business administration, so some of you take BWL as, I don't know, as Zusatz supplement subject that you have to do. One of the topics is the modern workplace, which is true, and you have decided to hold a talk and discuss the whole thing with your classmates in English as well. Gives you the reason, like the situation always has to give you a reason why you should speak in English. Obviously, situation should be a real life thing. You hold it in your English class, which is which makes you speak English. The umbrella topic basically is the modern working world, so that basically, or quite clearly, lends itself to a comparison with what jobs looked like in the past. That is one of the topics that gives you the freedom to speak. You can talk about different chances that people had in education 50 or 80 years back. Maybe not that many different options in terms of schooling, maybe not that many possibilities in terms of going to university and so on and so forth. Benefits that good employers offer to their staff nowadays. That is where the so-called, well, it's quite hard to write on a computer like that. Second bullet point is maybe the one where the whole work-life balance thing comes into play as well. Nowadays, companies try to make lives quite nice for their employers. So there's a lot of incentives. Incentives is the English word for Anreize, so something that gives you a reason to be happy in the morning whenever you can go back or when you can go to work. On-site kindergartens, different types of benefits, mobile phones, cars, extra days off, whatever. And problems that the modern day workforce may encounter. Well, that is something that those of you who read the newspaper every now and then will be familiar with. There's stuff out there like the pay gap, discrimination in the workplace, and so on and so forth. Something that you could talk about here. We have modern day problems again in the dialogue. Age discrimination, difficulties of working women, pay gap, and so on and so forth. That's a text, I think, a quite good one. You will get the link. And then we talk about work in general. What problems do we encounter? If you're ready.
Yeah.
You are still John, and you're still a biologist.
Of course I'm John.
That is, I think that's a really nice, like, fake identity, and so you stick with that.
John Travolta.
Sure. Our audience is too young for even knowing who that is, so just don't.
We just know Drake.
We could show them a clip of
John Travolta right now.
Yeah, the really cheesy one with the, I can't remember, the dancing one. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
I think I know which you were.
You definitely do. You're old enough for that. So would you mind telling us something, well, the umbrella sentence, kind of the modern working world, but obviously there are differences to what work looks like for us nowadays and what it looked like for parents and grandparents. Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, yeah, you can hear me. Okay. I think work compared to 50 years back to nowadays is basically back in those days, so 50 years is actually a lot. And if you think about today, we have almost everyone can take any chance concerning education. If somebody doesn't have a lot of money, there are subventions or something, or You can get no, I have to start differently. What I wanted to say, the economy nowadays allows us to do everything we want in a education. Speaking of education, especially since the players in the economy are, of course, interested in people that have certain knowledge in certain fields. Therefore, there are programs like Zentralmatura, for example, which is great for people that just say, okay, with 15 they want to do apprenticeship because they want to earn money, but they also want to do further education or reach a higher level in education. Therefore, they can do Zentralmatura. Back in the days, that wasn't really possible. So if someone decided upon doing different studies, maybe, it wasn't possible for everyone. So if the parents weren't didn't have that much money, it would have been or it was quite difficult to do what you want. And of course, in a job situation that was similar. So back in the days, you had just to either pick the job that is offered to you or don't have any job. And nowadays there are a lot of jobs. You have just, if you I don't know, if you open any platform, you can find jobs. There are thousands of jobs in Tyrol, in Innsbruck, where you can do everything basic. Of course, you have to have certain education in it or training, but you can, there are a lot of jobs that are offered. And back in the days, it was just, if you did a specific education, you had to do that job. Nowadays they are more interconnected, so if you maybe did a technical job and you're good at something else, you can work in a not only in a company that serves technical service, but also, I don't know, does design or something. So it became a bit more open-minded, I'd say. So the next time I want to talk about the benefits the good employers offer their staff. So of course, if we talk about on-site kindergartens, I think a good example is the University of Innsbruck. They have an on-site kindergarten. If you like the building or not is your own decision. But of course, people that work here, not only professors, have the option, but also students, of course, they also can have children, have the opportunity to use that kindergarten. I don't know if it's different if you're a student, because I know somebody and she had to pay something, I don't know how much. If you're really an employee there, I don't know about it, but I think it's normally in the school I went, there was also an on-site kindergarten, and I think they didn't have to pay anything. So I don't know. And of course, sometimes maybe field trips or just fun things to do. I know about companies that have sports class or offer sports class. They offer yoga classes. They offer different chill out areas, table tennis. I don't know, they have some bigger companies even have gyms. They have pools and all this stuff you can dream of. But of course, it has a purpose, which is to make you work more efficient.
That's true. Which is all of what you just mentioned plays very nicely into the second part.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned on-site kindergartens, which is one aspect. You mentioned different types of recreation and stuff. How would you, like, there is this big word, work-life balance out there, like picking it or tearing it apart and analyzing the separate, like the words as such is probably quite self-evident what it is. But could you tell us what work-life balance is and why it is so much of an issue nowadays? You hear it all the time and people talk about work-life balance all the time and try to get work-life balance all the time.
Yeah. Work-life balance, yeah, that's the thing nowadays. And of course it's important since people tend to overwork themselves and are stressed out because of work, because they have a lot to do. Even students have it. Yeah, that's something.
True.
That's true, yeah. And of course, it is important to have something different than work. So, for example, you start working from, you start at 8 or 7, and then you go home at 5 or 4:30. You need something to do. It depends on people, on the person. For some people, it's just doing sports. A lot of people actually. Maybe you just want to relax and lay down, or do music, so play an instrument, or it depends. But you need something to recreate. So to stop thinking about work. No, it's difficult even if it's your own company, but you need to stop working at some point. And I think the mentality nowadays is also at the same time where there is the mentality of the work-life balance and the importance of it. There is also a movement which I think is going on, that people want to put in their days as much as possible. So they get up at 4 and try to do exercises, I don't know, and then go to work and do something different. It's okay. I also like to achieve my goals, but I think it's really important for you, even as a young person, to give your brain and your body a break from work, and especially if you're sitting the whole day.
That's a good aspect. Yeah, I guess we all know that problem. Trying to like cram as much into our day as possible, but then still feel like, okay, sports is a very good work-life balance achiever, I think. Since we don't have that much time, we're gonna quickly talk about the discrimination issue very, very quickly. The fact that there is this thing like the pay gap out there is obvious. People, or not only the pay gap, but also the fact that there are fewer women working in really good jobs. I guess if you look at university, for example, that would serve as an example. There is this law that says, well, in higher positions you have to have X amount of women in leading positions. Is that a good thing if you make it compulsory? Like the Frauenquote, if you say, well, you have to have two CEOs who are women and 2 who are men, or?
It depends, because it also has to be, I think one of the best systems, or a good system, is that the University of Innsbruck is using. I think still using. I hope so. If there are two maybe future employees, so there are two people that applied for the job. They have the same amount of, I don't know, published articles. They have a really good CV. They have a lot of experience. So they're on an educational level, they are equal. And if they're equal, they always decide or they always choose the woman. Which of course can be argued that it's maybe unfair or but I think that's the best system, and especially if we take a look back in the past where women haven't had a really hard job to gain their rights until now, it's okay. So if, of course, there are people that argue, yeah, but that's not fair because now it's just the other way. But I think that's a really good system. Yeah.
That was a very nice closing word. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Oh, no. Okay. Good. Let's have a quick look at what he said. Well, yeah, the 50 years back, I think, 50 years back, sorry. The argument about the job choices and the educational choices and also the option of the Lehre mit Matura was really good because, well, that's the target group that, you know, we are talking about, that we are talking to basically. And that's definitely true. The chances of combining an apprenticeship and the Matura wasn't there until a couple of years ago. Not that long ago, actually. So I think that was a very good point, a very good example also that you could bring up in your exams. He also talked about the incentives, the on-site kindergartens. What I'm missing here is the sports options, which is definitely true. Companies nowadays have gyms and so on and so forth and try and help their employees relax. Ignore the things on the side here. I was trying to write something down, but couldn't. The last point I skipped. I basically interrupted him, first of all, because time was up, and secondly, because I noticed that it would be a repetition of task 2, which was my fault. That was a flaw in my exam, or when I put it together. I overlooked that, so I had to interrupt. But anyway, the time was up, but I can't, I can't. It's not his fault, it was mine. So, yeah, we talked about most of those aspects. I think the difficulties of working women, that was already included in what he said about the kindergarten, at least for a little bit.